Welcome to Excel Magic Trick number 1381. Hey, if you want to download this Excel workbook, Excel Magic Trick 1381 start or the finished file so you can follow along, click on the link below the video. Hey, we got an amazing video here. We have a bad data set where the actual field names and then records are listed in a single column. We need to bring this in to Power Query, create a proper data set, and then create 2 reports. These are listing the top 3 values for 2 categories, domestic and agriculture. And we need to have a parameter, the number 3, that decides how many in the top sales numbers to extract. If we change it here, these 2 reports need to update. Not only that, but if we have a tie for third, we need to extract all of the items for the tie. Now, this amazing Power Query solution comes from Bill Szysz at YouTube. And these are the many amazing steps we're going to try and do to get this to work. And not only that, but later we'll have new data. We'll put it here, and then we'll refresh, and everything will update. Hey, let's go over to the sheet Data and Reports. Now, here's our data set. Here's our parameter for top items. Each one of these have already been converted to an Excel table. I highlighted the whole table, went to Insert Table, or use Control-T, and I named both of these tables. So each one of these has a name. Now we need to import both of these. We'll import our parameter table first, so a single cell. Now we need to get this into Power Query, and I have Excel 2016. So on the Data Ribbon tab, there it is, Get and Transform. That is Power Query. If you have Excel 2010 or 13, you have to download Power Query as a separate tab. Now I have a single cell, so I go up to From Table. That will bring an Excel table into the query editor. Now I'm going to come over here, and that table over in Excel is called Parameter Table. I'm going to put a 01 at the end of this so the query name is different, and Enter. Now, actually, we're going to have 4 queries, so I'm going to name each one of them sequentially. Now, we do not need this change type step, so I'm going to delete it. We need to get this from a table into a single number we can use in other queries. So I'm going to very carefully not right-click the field name, but right-click the cell, right-click, and point to Drill Down. There we have it as a number. Now I'm going to Home, close and load 2. I only want this as a connection. Click Load. Our queries pane opens. There's our query. We get to use that query in other queries. Now I come over, and we need to get our data set into Power Query. Instead of clicking that button right there, I'm going to use the keyboard Alt-APT. I'm going to come over and rename this. Records and column, start 02, because this is the second query, and Enter. Now we have a data type that's any, so I don't need that. So I'm going to X out this change type. We need to do a few things to this column here. The first thing is I would like to trim this column and get rid of all the extra spaces. So I go up to the Transform tab, over to Text Column Group Format, and there it is, Trim. We have trimmed all those values. Now I need to get rid of the empty cells, so I come up to the Filter. Here's our unique list of items, and I can see a blank. So I'm going to uncheck that, click OK. Now we have some cleaned records, but they're still all in the same column. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to notice the field names 1, 2, 3. Then the records 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So somehow I need to get those 3 items into 1, 2, 3 different columns. Now we can use Transform Pivot to do that, but we actually need a column here with the numbers 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, and so on, so that when we pivot this, the 0, 1, 2 will all be grouped into 3 different columns. Now, in order to add this extra column, we actually have to come over to Add Column. And I would like to, from number, use that drop down to give me the 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2. But that only works on a number column. No problem. We're still in Add Columns. I'm going to come over to Add Index Column. We're going to start with base 0. So it starts at 0 and goes all the way, incrementing one number at a time. Now, this column is a number. So now notice from number, there's our dropdown standard. And we want to use the mod function like over in Excel, but over in Power Query, it's called modulo. Now, mod function in Excel and modulo requires a denominator. There's our denominator 3. Now, it will go through each row. 0 divided by 3, well, the remainder is 0. 1 divided by 3, the remainder is 1. 2 divided by 3, the remainder is 2. And then notice the remainders here, 0, 1, 2. So modulo 3, when I click OK, that's our column we're going to use to pivot this and group all the records together. All of the zeros will be in a single column. All of the ones will be in a single column. Now, there's a few ways we can proceed from here. The way I've always done it and read about it in books and seen it in other videos, I'm going to do this in high speed, and then I'm going to get rid of it and show you a new way. Normally, we come up, transform, pivot. It's going to ask me which column. I need those to be pivoted into 3 columns. I do not want to use an aggregate calculation. I want to say do not aggregate. Now, before I click OK, notice these numbers, 0, 1, 2, 3, all the way down, they're all different. So every one of these will be in a different row. When I click OK, there's a bunch of nulls. But no problem. Select 1, select 2, holding Shift, right-click, fill up. And look at that. It fills up all of the items. Now we can come to this column and filter out the nulls. Now we have a record. Right-click, remove. Now notice that took 1, 2, 3, 4 steps. But now I'm going to get rid of all these and show the method that Bill Szysz suggested. Well, if this column has different numbers and are causing all of those nulls, if we had the numbers 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, then when we unpivoted, all 3 of these would be on a single line. Well, OK, we used the modulo over here to get the remainder, but we used it as an extra column. Here we're going to use something similar, not an extra column, transform. Over to number column, there's our standard dropdown. And if we used divide, that would give us an integer and a decimal. If we use modulo, it gives me just the remainder. That's the mod function in Excel. But integer divide, that's like the quotient function over in Excel. That gives me just the integer part. So when I click that and give it denominator 3, well, 0 divided by 3 is 0 with remainder 0. 1 divided by 3 is 0 with remainder 1. 3 divided by 2 is 0, remainder 2. And then when we go to 3, 4, 5, those will be all 1s. Click OK. There's our pattern. Now we can come over to the mod column, select it, pivot column. Our values come from the data column, advanced option. Don't aggregate. Click OK. And look at that. They're already in single rows representing records. Now we can come over here, right-click, remove. We still have a few more steps. The top row need to be our field name. So we either use that button up here or right in the upper left-hand corner. Click Use First Row as headers. We have our data types for each column, except for this one. So I'm going to click the ABC button and change this to whole number data type. Now, we need to sort these from biggest to smallest. That'll help us later getting the top 3. So I'm going to say sort descending. Now, there it is. We have transformed that column of records into a proper data set, and the outstanding column is sorted. There's all of our steps. There is our name. Now, check this out. We can come over to the left side and expand our queries. These query names are the same exact names as we see in our query pane over here. Now we're going to come over here And I want to look at the very first step we had, which is source, Excel.currentWorkbook. It's looking at the table name, records and columns. And of course, we went all the way down to the bottom. That's the end result. But now, that's connected to our Excel table. Now I want to create a new query that has our domestic report. So I'm going to right-click and reference. Now, what reference means is if you look over in the source, there it is. It says equals. That's the name of our query. So this is referencing the previous query, which is referencing our Excel table. Now, I want to rename this, and I love this over here in Power Query, just like Windows Explorer and Access. If we use the F2 key, that puts the query name in edit mode, and I can type domestic report 03 and enter. Now, what do we need over here? Well, the first thing we need is we need to filter this. And I'm going to filter this to show only domestic. Click OK. Now, every step that we do in all these queries has a line of code and at least one function. Notice Table.SelectRows, and there is the condition we use to filter. Please show us all domestic. That'll become important because later in a subsequent query, we'll edit this to show only agriculture. Now, I want to come over here, and I'm going to use that same keyboard, F2, and I want to get rid of the space. Now, that's not totally necessary, but it makes referring to steps easier because when you don't have any spaces, you don't have to use double quotes and a pound sign. Now, remember that. Filtered rows. We're actually going to take this table and add a bunch of steps to actually find the hurdle value. That is the value that cuts this table off, showing the top three. We're actually going to add all those steps, get that number in this applied steps list here, and then we're going to relist filtered rows down here, which means we'll reuse the step and then use our hurdle value. All right, so what do we want to do here? We're trying to get at that third value. So I'm going to click on the outstanding column, go up to Home, Keep Rows, Keep Top Rows. And for the time being, I'm just going to type a 3 here. We really want our parameter table 01, our first query. But when I click OK, there's the function Table.FirstN. Filtered rows, that's actually the name of the previous step 3. Well, guess what? I'm going to edit this. I'm going to highlight that 3 right there and type the name of our first query, parameter table 01, and enter. Hopefully, I spelled it right. And look at that. It totally worked. Now, remember, I'm trying to get at just that number so we have it as a number and we can use in subsequent queries. So I got the top 3. Now I want to keep rows, but I want to keep only the bottom row. I'm going to put a 1. Click OK. That one's fine to be hard-coded in because once we get the top 3 values, we want the bottom one. And guess what? It doesn't matter that we got this one and not the other one because if there are ties, this is exactly the same as the ties. Now, I need that as a number, so I'm going to do that same trick. Select the cell, right-click, drill down, and instantly we have a number. Now, notice the name of that is outstanding. I'm going to select this, F2, and call this HurdleValue and enter. That's a step in our applied steps. It's a single number. I actually want to bring the filtered rows down here and then use that hurdle value. So watch this. I'm going to come up to the f of x and click f of x. That adds a new step down here. I'm simply going to type equals filtered rows and enter. And look at that. It brings this back. Now I'm going to come down here, F2, and I'm going to call this filters row 02 and enter. Now, the reason we had to create the hurdle value and not just do top 3 is because we do have a problem with ties. I actually want some function that will say, please select all the values from this column that are greater than or equal to the hurdle value. Now, we could use filter to do this. Bill Szysz mentioned that if you use filter, it has to go through every record. But if instead of using filter, we say keep rows, keep top rows. We're going to use a dummy data for a second. We're going to put a 3 here. And now we have this table.firstN filtered rows. 2, that's the previous step. And we want to highlight this. And we have to be careful because table.firstN is going to start at the top and look down. So we actually, instead of just saying greater than or equal to the hurdle, we have to type each all in lowercase. And then we have to put the field name here. Field names are always in square brackets. Outstanding in square bracket. Greater than or equal to. And this is where we're going to type HurdleValue. Hopefully I spelled all that right. And enter. And sure enough, that's our function line of code that will always get us the top 3 values, even if there is a tie. Now that's our third query. And I want to look over here at source. That's the first step here. Remember, that was already looking at this table up here. So if I don't want to recreate all this, and I simply want to copy this down here and change domestic to agriculture, I can right-click duplicate. Now, duplicate brings over all the same steps, including step 1, where it's looking at the dynamic table over in Excel. Now, I'm going to click here, F2, and call this Agriculture Report 04 and enter. Now, I can go up to any one of these steps, and if it doesn't have a catastrophic effect on the rest of the steps, I can change elements in it. So I'm going to come up to the formula bar, highlight domestic, and in all caps, type agriculture and enter. Now I click on the last one to look, and boom, there it is. Now, we have our 4 queries. We have all of our steps in each one. I'm going to go up to close and load 2. For the time being, I'm going to say only create a connection. We could see over here it's going to load all 3 as a connection. The first and second one we want as a connection. Now I want to load this over into the sheet, so I'm actually first going to select E1, right-click, load to, as a table, existing, click load. Now I come and I'm going to select I1, right-click, load to, table, existing, click load. There are our 2 reports. It all better be dynamic. So when I change this to and enter, I either have to go up to data, refresh all, or I'm going to use the keyboard Control-Alt-F5. And just like that, it refreshes. Now I'm going to change this 3, enter. Change the number here, make it some big number, 55,000. Control-Enter, Control-Alt-F5, and look at that. Now, one last test, and actually this will probably break it, but that's OK. We'll break it and try and fix it. I want to copy this, so I click in the top, scroll down, hold Shift, click on the last one, Control-C, Control-Home to jump over here, and very carefully. Now, that data set I know is bigger than this. If it was smaller, I would have to adjust the size by pulling this up. But I know that that data set is bigger, so if I paste it, right-click, and I'm going to paste as values only. And there, if I scroll down to the bottom, it's a few rows bigger. There were a few different records at the bottom. But I have my new data. Now I'm going to Control-Alt-F5. And it doesn't look like an updated. And sure enough, I can see an error over here. And I can hover. And in general, the errors in Power Query and Power Pivot seem to be pretty good. It says we couldn't convert number. And it gives me details, AJMER. So I'm going to right-click, Edit. And I'm going to click at the top and look. Scroll down. And there seems to be a problem. There are some null values. And I'm actually not quite sure why the null values. I suspected that when we trimmed it and we filtered it out by a blank. So I'm going to come down here. And we see there's our step. Each, and then the name of the column, not equal to double quote, double quote. Well, I'm going to alter this. Space, and this is going to be an AND logical test. So I'm going to say AND space, square bracket, data, close square bracket, not equal to, and null in Power Query is just typed out N-U-L-L lowercase. And now when I hit Enter, that should do it, getting rid of the nulls. Now I'm going to click Close and Load. Try this again, Control-Alt-F5, and there we have everything updated. Now every day we get these new values, we just dump them here, change whatever top values we want, and boom, everything is working. Wow, it's awesome to hang out on our online Excel team. Thanks to Bill Szysz for this great Power Query trick. We'll see you next video.